The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras ready. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the angry veteran who had allegedly assaulted a city housing official during a heated argument. Daniel Brooks, a 42-year-old former U.S. Army sergeant, stood quietly in a faded gray suit that hung a little loose on his broad frame. 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. A recipient of the Purple Heart. Now facing up to 5 years in prison for assault. The prosecutor's voice cut sharply through the room. He lost control. He attacked a public servant in a government building. That is not heroism. That is violence. Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. Daniel didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. His hands, rough and scarred, rested calmly in front of him. The same hands that once pulled injured soldiers out of burning vehicles. The same hands now labeled dangerous. But no one in that room knew what happened before the shove that made headlines. 3 months earlier, Daniel had been sleeping in his truck. After struggling with PTSD and missing weeks of work due to panic attacks, he fell behind on rent. The apartment he had proudly signed for after leaving the military was gone within weeks. He applied for emergency veteran housing assistance, the program he had been told would always be there. For 6 weeks, he called. For 6 weeks, he waited. The day of the incident, he had finally secured an in-person meeting with a city housing official. According to witnesses, the discussion grew tense. Daniel explained he hadn't slept indoors in days. He brought documentation, medical records, service awards. The official reportedly told him, "There are others with greater need." Something inside Daniel cracked, not in rage, but in desperation. He raised his voice. Security footage later showed the official pointing toward the exit. Daniel stepped forward, pleading. When the official turned away mid-sentence, Daniel reached out and grabbed his arm. Not a punch, not a strike, a desperate grab. The official stumbled backward and fell against a desk. No serious injuries, but enough to press charges. Back in the courtroom, Daniel finally spoke. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," he said, voice steady but heavy. "I just didn't want to disobey." Silence fell, because suddenly, this wasn't a story about an angry veteran. It was about a man who served his country, and then felt forgotten by it. Since returning home, Daniel had struggled in ways no one could see. Fireworks on the 4th of July sent him diving to the floor. A car backfiring could freeze him mid-step. Crowded grocery stores made his chest tighten until he had to abandon his cart and walk out. After 2 combat tours overseas, normal life felt unfamiliar. Daniel Brooks, a 42-year-old former U.S. Army sergeant, had once led patrols through dangerous territory. Now he worked nights as a warehouse security guard in a quiet industrial park outside the city. He chose the graveyard shift on purpose. Fewer people, less noise, less chance of something triggering memories he tried every day to bury. His disability benefits helped cover rent and groceries for him and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. It wasn't much, but it kept the lights on. Then one morning, the payments stopped. No warning, no explanation. He received a letter weeks later claiming there had been a documentation discrepancy. Until it was resolved, his benefits were suspended. Daniel made calls, sat on hold, sent emails. Nothing moved. So on the day of the incident, he went to City Hall in person. He brought everything, medical records, discharge papers, letters confirming his service-related injuries. He just wanted someone to fix what looked like a clerical error. Security footage, later played repeatedly on the news, showed only part of what happened. Daniel standing at the counter, Daniel raising his voice, then a sudden movement, then officers rushing in and tackling him to the floor. Case closed, or so it seemed. The headlines were brutal. Veteran erupts at city office. Public official attacked. But what the public didn't see was the first 12 minutes of that video. The part before the shouting. The footage that Daniel kept whispering about to his attorney during every meeting. "Play the full video," he would say quietly. "All of it." Because in the missing portion, Daniel wasn't yelling. He was explaining. He told the clerk that without the benefits, he couldn't pay rent. He mentioned his daughter had asthma medication that needed refilling. He asked if there was an emergency override. The clerk told him to file another form. Daniel explained he already had. Twice. When a supervisor approached, the tone shifted. According to court documents, the supervisor suggested Daniel calm down or leave. In the full video, Daniel's voice cracks before it rises. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he says. "I just need this fixed." Moments later, as he gestures toward the paperwork in frustration, an officer misinterprets the movement as aggression. The clip that went viral starts there. But Daniel knew the truth lived in the beginning. And if the full video played in court, the story might change from angry veteran to something far more complicated and far more human. The prosecutor had confidently shown just 20 seconds of footage. 20 seconds that painted Daniel Brooks as unstable, aggressive, dangerous. The clip showed him stepping forward, jaw tight, voice raised. Then officers rushing in as chaos erupted. To the jury, it looked simple, but the defense stood. "Your Honor, we request the full recording." After a tense pause, the judge nodded. The screen flickered. This time, the timestamp rolled back nearly 3 minutes earlier. The courtroom leaned forward. Daniel stood at the counter, paperwork neatly stacked in his hands. His posture wasn't threatening. It was tired. He pointed to a section of a form, explaining something. His lips moved calmly. The city official across from him didn't look engaged. He leaned back in his chair, rolled his eyes, pushed the paperwork back across the counter with 2 fingers. In the video, Daniel's shoulders sagged slightly. The official said something. The audio in the courtroom was faint, muffled by distance and background noise. Daniel suddenly went still. Not angry. Still. His attorney stood again. "Your Honor, we request enhanced audio." The judge agreed. A technician adjusted the sound levels. The room was so quiet that even the reporters stopped typing. Then the speakers crackled. The official's voice came through clearly this time. "You soldiers think you deserve special treatment. You're not heroes." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Daniel didn't move for a full second after the comment. In the footage, his eyes blinked slowly, like someone absorbing a blow that wasn't physical. The official continued, quieter but audible. "The war's over. Get over it." Murmurs grew louder in the gallery. Then the moment everyone thought they understood played again, but differently. The official stood abruptly. Papers scattered. He stepped forward and shoved Daniel in the chest. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a punch. But it was first. Daniel stumbled backward into the edge of the counter. His hands came up instinctively. He stepped forward again, not striking, but reacting, trying to steady himself and push space between them. Within seconds, officers tackled him from the side, forcing him to the ground. Freeze frame. The defense attorney let the silence linger. "No attack," she said quietly. "A reaction." The prosecutor no longer looked confident. In 20 seconds, Daniel had seemed like an aggressor. In 3 full minutes, he looked like a man pushed, physically and verbally, past a breaking point. The narrative that had once felt airtight now had cracks. And for the first time since his arrest, Daniel didn't look exhausted. He looked hurt. Daniel finally spoke. The courtroom, once buzzing with whispers and shifting chairs, became still. "I didn't go there to fight," he said, his voice shaking despite his effort to steady it. "I went there because my daughter needed food." The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded worn, like they had been carried alone for too long. Daniel Brooks, a 42-year-old former U.S. Army sergeant, kept his eyes forward, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "For months, my disability payments just stopped," he continued. "I called every number they gave me. I left messages. I filled out forms they said were missing. I mailed copies of my records twice." He swallowed hard. No one called back. In the gallery, reporters who once scribbled eagerly now paused. Daniel described opening his fridge one night and seeing almost nothing inside. He talked about telling his 8-year-old daughter that they were having breakfast for dinner again because cereal was cheaper. He mentioned pawning his watch, the one his unit had given him after his second deployment, just to cover a utility bill. "I served my country," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I didn't ask for special treatment. I just wanted help fixing a mistake." Silence filled the courtroom. One juror, a middle-aged woman in the front row, discreetly wiped tears from her cheek. Another leaned back, arms crossed tightly, no longer skeptical, but reflective. The prosecutor, who had earlier spoken with crisp certainty, now avoided eye contact. The confidence that once framed the case as open and shut seemed to thin under the weight of Daniel's words. The defense attorney didn't interrupt. She didn't need to, because for the first time since the trial began, People weren't looking at Daniel as a headline or a security clip frozen mid-motion. They weren't seeing the 20 seconds of chaos. They were seeing a father who worked nights to avoid panic attacks. A man who stood in line at City Hall not to argue, but to protect his child from going hungry. The uniform he once wore wasn't in the room. The medals weren't displayed. But his humanity was. And suddenly, this wasn't just a case about a shove in a government office. It was about how easily someone can be labeled, and how powerful it is when the full story finally gets heard. After 3 hours of intense deliberation, the jury finally returned to the courtroom. The members in the gallery quieted instantly as the foreperson stood and cleared her throat. "Not guilty," she announced. A wave of relief swept through Daniel Brooks. His shoulders, which had seemed perpetually burdened, loosened slightly. The tension that had weighed on him for months, the nights of anxiety, the fear of prison, the shame of being misunderstood, began to lift, just a little. But the story didn't end with a verdict. The judge, an experienced and thoughtful woman, addressed the courtroom. Her voice was calm but carried weight. "This case is a reminder," she said, eyes sweeping the room, "that justice requires the whole truth, not just pieces of it. We cannot make decisions based on fragments. We must see the full picture, listen carefully, and understand context. Only then can justice truly be served." The words hung in the air, a lesson not just for the courtroom but for everyone present, reporters, spectators, and even the legal teams. Outside the courthouse in downtown Chicago, the city buzzed with activity, but a small crowd of reporters had gathered, cameras poised and microphones ready. They wanted a reaction. They wanted sound bites. Daniel didn't give them one. He didn't cheer. He didn't wave. He didn't smile for the cameras. Instead, he walked slowly through the crowd and knelt down in front of his young daughter, Lily. She ran into his arms, her small arms wrapping tightly around him. For a moment, the world outside, the flashing cameras, the buzzing reporters, the noise of the city, faded away. He held her close, whispering quietly, "It's okay now. We're okay." And for the first time in years, Daniel stood a little taller. The invisible weight of fear and frustration had lifted, replaced with something quieter but stronger, hope. The courthouse doors closed behind him, but the lesson remained. That day, the courtroom didn't just hear evidence, arguments, or legal jargon. It heard a man's story in full, his struggles, his courage, his desperation, and his humanity. And for those who witnessed it, it was more than a verdict. It was a reminder that truth, when fully seen, has the power to change perception, to restore dignity, and to remind us all why justice matters. Daniel walked away, not as a headline, not as a clip in a newsreel, but as a father, a veteran, and a human being finally seen for who he truly was. How many stories are judged before the full truth is heard? How many veterans fight battles long after they return home? If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who believes in real justice, and subscribe for more powerful courtroom stories from across America. Because sometimes, silence in a courtroom speaks louder than any verdict.